that involved actual talent, like singing You'll Never Walk Alone, or my favorite variation of Manchester United's hymn, but that would require blatant breaking of rule number 1. So, instead, I have 2 stories for you.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. The first is true, and the second is not so true.
We already know about Ricardo.
I was hoping you guys would get that one. Right, so the first story is about an Anglican minister in England at the time of the First World War. His name was William Archibald Spooner. And you see,
Spooner Street.
Family
Guy, Spooner Street was named after him.
Mr. Spooner was a very devout man. He had a large congregation, but he had a small problem with his brain. You see, he turned his syllables, or cerned his syllables. So, Mr. Spooner would be reading his sermon. The sermon would say, "The Lord is a loving shepherd." But Mr. Spooner would say, "The Lord is a shoving leopard." One day, after Mr. Spooner had finished his sermon, he addressed his congregation, and he said, "As a patriotic gesture, when the lads come home from France, all the hags should be flung out." Most people went home and hung out their flags, but the hags went into hiding for months. And of course, weddings were terrible, because it was customary to cuss the bride. You should have heard the And one day, when Mr. Spooner was reading his sermon, he looked out over the congregation and he noticed that one of the women in his congregation had gotten up and left. And so when another woman came and took the seat she had left, he walked down, tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Pardon me, madam, this pie is occupied. Please allow me to sew you to another sheet." And so, that unfortunately is where we leave Mr. Spooner and transition into our second story. And it's a story you all should know very well. It's the story of Cinderella. And of course, Cinderella lived in a big harked house with her evil stepmother and her 2 sifty uglers. They made Cinderella do all the worry jerk while they sat around all day cheating offlets and magging magazines. And one day, when Cinderella was flopping the moor, ran in. They were very excited. They said, "Guess what? Guess what? The Prince of Mints." Remember him? The Prince of Mints. He's throwing a Banshee Fest brawl. Too bad you can't go. And so, Cinderella was very sad by this, and she had ears in her ties. And she was just about to chickasee a friend when there was a lightning blast of flight. But her Mary Fodguther. And Cinderella said, "Well, who are you?" And the Mary Fodguther said, "Well, I'm your Mary Fodguther. Who do you expect?" "I can grant you one wish." And Cinderella said, "I'd like to go to the ball." And Mary Fodguther said, "Oh, that's fine." And she waved her wand, and Cinderella was transformed into a Babishing Rudy with a necklace of poobies and rules. And of course, 2 sash slippers that fit perfectly on her feet. Mary Fodguther said, she said, "You must promise to be home by midnight." And of course, Cinderella, having promised that, went off to the ball. And as she cast to the cable that came to the castle, the first 2 people she ran into were her 50 others. But of course, she was so beautiful that they didn't even Cinderize Recognola. The next person she ran into was the Prancing Hints himself, and he was immediately very enamored because she reminded him of Beeping Slooty, and he said, "May I dab Miss Hence?" And so she started dancing with him, and he was falling more and more in love by the minute. And he was just about to ask for her mare in handage and introduce Cinderella to his mother, the queer dean, who was busy. fox swatted the pike's well, and Cinderella banned from the roll. But as she ran, one of the sass-clippers flipped for her soot. The Prancing Prince was desperate. He walked over, he picked up the sass-clipper, and he said, "Now I know what I must do. I must find the maiden whose soot this flipper sits, and I'll know with whom I've fallen in love." So he went throughout the kingdom from house to house, but you can't turn that around. House to house, house to house. Pretty soon he tried the sass-clipper on every priest in the kingdom, but it couldn't it, and it couldn't it again. And so pretty soon he came to the sin where House Derrill lived, and he docked on the north. And the Siskeugglers answered the door. They were very excited to try on the sass-clipper. But of course their feet were too big. And it couldn't it. And it couldn't it again. And then it was Cinderella's turn, and of course the lip fitted perfectly, so they lived happily ever after. But there's a moral to the story. And that of course is that some of our smubbles are trawl, and some of our bubbles are trig. But if we trad no hubbles, how could we recognize our restings?